You to, if you want to continue watching the movie, go purchase it on Amazon or read the book. Or after the day, maybe you'll know as much as you want to about it. But we're going to start in just a minute. So I had to turn up the lights, and we're going to transition, and we'll be right back. Start in just a minute. So I had to turn up the lights, and we're going to transition, and we'll be right back. Start in just a minute. So I had to turn up the lights, and we're going to transition, and we'll be right back. It's time to go. We're going to be live streaming this section from 1 to 3. Thank you for coming, and I hope that you got something to eat, because the spaghetti social from 11 to 1, we officially have to say that we're closing that down to self-serve. So you can get over there, get any of the leftovers that are left over there, because Henrietta Lacks would not like it if you walked in here and there wasn't no food. That was not her way of doing business. As a matter of fact, she was not a business person at all. She was always about her family and taking care of people. And so that's what today is all about. Today is someone you know. So if you didn't know Henrietta Lacks, the idea is that today you'll find out that you already knew Henrietta Lacks, because you may not know her in person, but her cells are so beneficial. Somewhere in your life, you've come across her of some sort. So I'm David Sanders. I'm a student here, and I'm a cancer survivor. And I'm here today because her cells gave the treatment that saved my life when I had cancer. And I'm in my last semester, so I wanted to be able to, first off, thank Salt Lake Community College, thank Student Services, thank Science and Engineering Group of the school. There's several other people, ODMA. But you know, it's kind of interesting that Salt Lake Community College is a place where caring happens. And that's what's most important. I could have gone anywhere to any school, had a scholarship, but I came here, well, one, because my brother cared when he was the provost, and that was good. But then he brought me into a place where there's a lot of people. Why are you laughing, Gina? He brought me into a place where there's a lot of caring people. And that's why I decided to stay. And that's why I'm glad to share Henrietta Lacks with you today. So we're going to move our program along so that we make sure everybody has the space to do what they want to do. And right now, I'm going to ask Dean Craig Caldwell of the School of Science, Mathematics, and Engineering to hold it, because I got to ask Gina to come on up and give the invocation.
Good afternoon. The invocation is a word of prayer, so let us go before the Lord. Father God, we come in the name of Jesus to say thank you, Lord God, for another day. We ask, oh God, for the forgiveness of our sins. We thank you, Father God, for just the vision that you have given David Sanders to bring forth the awareness of Henrietta Lacks, oh God, and how her cells are beneficial, Father God, and have been beneficial from the time that the doctors used her cells to further their achievements in science, Lord God. Although we know it wasn't right, we know that experimentations took place without authorization against people of color, black people in particular, oh God, but we thank you that we serve a God who sits high and look low, oh God. So we ask that you be in the midst of this program today. Bless everyone that will come up and speak and educate and share experiences or words of wisdom, and just let us leave knowledgeable about how we can be aware of Henrietta Lacks' cells in our lives today, and how we can go out and educate others who may not know about the blessing that she was unawarely and unbeknowingly to the rest of the world, oh God. We just thank you and we love you, and we ask that this program goes forth with great power and enthusiasm. And thank you again, God, for David's vision. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, I feel like something wonderful is going to happen, don't you? I do. Now, I don't want you to be overly concerned about, the attendance that we're having at this moment, because this event is live streamed. Is that right? Yes, the tech people said it's live streamed, which means it's all good. Don't have to be in the house to be in the house. I love that. And so now I can let the microphone go to Dean Caldwell.
Hello, I am Craig Caldwell. I'm the Dean for Science, Math, and Engineering at Salt Lake Community College. David asked me to come up and give a few words about my experience with Henrietta Lacks and what her life has meant as a scientist, for me as a scientist and my training as a scientist. So to tell you about that, I have to go back to what it meant to me to be a scientist and where that all started. And I grew up in a small southern town that didn't have a major research university, but I knew from an early age that I wanted to be a scientist. And it's hard to know how to do that if you don't have family members or if you don't have mentors around you that teach you how to do something like that. Learning how to be a scientist is more of an idea than it is a process. But I was always the child early in my life that was more interested in things being alive than in things not being alive. So while other people were shooting things, I was busy reading about them, observing them, and in many cases trying to save them from the people who I felt were not respecting those living things. I remember in my junior year of college, a student, and I don't often remember the names of my other students that were with me in college, but this guy, his name was Kenneth. And he's the first person that ever mentioned to me the idea that we could grow cells outside of a body. Now, I'm not talking about bacteria or yeast or things like that that are naturally single-celled. He was talking about the idea of taking cells out of a larger complex organism and growing those in a dish. He was talking about plants at the time. But that was my first experience with the idea, the amazing idea, that you could take something like that and learn how they lived and how they worked by taking them out of the thing in which they were normally found. As I went on into graduate school, I left that town and went to Texas, where I went to graduate school. And there I worked on fruit flies. So at that point in my training, we weren't working on cells in a dish, focused more on genetics and cell biology and the ways that organisms live. But as I finished my graduate work and earned my PhD, I learned that there was still one more step that I needed to go through in order to be a scientist. And that's to do what's called a postdoc. And if you don't know what a postdoc is, this is kind of like when Luke, goes back to visit Yoda and he says, I am a Jedi. And Yoda says, not yet. There's just one more thing you got to do. And that's kind of how it felt about the postdoc. There's one more thing. It's really the idea that you're going to be an apprentice scientist for a while. So I was close, but not quite there. And I was fortunate enough to earn a position to do a postdoctoral research position at the National Institutes of Health. And the place that I was stationed was in Baltimore, Maryland, which not coincidentally is where Ms. Lax lived during her time. The lab there was a government lab, and I felt like a scientist because I had an ID badge that opened the door for me and let me into the laboratories. And I remember arriving in those laboratories, and it felt like I had arrived because you walk in and there's all the things that as a kid, when I thought I wanted to be a scientist, what that means to a child is that you look around and there's machines and there's things on racks and there's beeping things and there's all the paraphernalia of science. You learn later that's not really what science is, but to my childish mind, that's what it was. And as I walked into that room at the National Institutes of Health, specifically the National Institute of Aging, I felt like I had arrived. There was all that kind of stuff. And particularly, the work that I was going to be doing was looking at a disease called von Hippel-Lindau syndrome. And this is a disease that affects people, gives them tumors of the kidneys and of the eyes. And I had to learn how to grow those cells, like Kenneth told me about in that junior year. I had to learn how to grow those cells so that we could try to understand why these people suffered from this disease. And we opened up the cabinet, and in my first few days there, I walked into a room, and there's a bank of what would look like kitchen cabinets, perhaps. They were made of metal. And they had the beeping lights on them, and they had various hoses and pipes, and you open those up, and you look in there, and there are flasks, little plastic dishes in there growing in a particular atmosphere. And on those flasks, there were words like NIH 3T3 and HEK. And unbeknownst to me at the time, there was one in particular that had the letters HELA on the flask. Capital H, little e, capital L, little a. HeLa cells. It became a word, and when you're in your postdoc, there's not a lot of time for reflection or wondering about where does this or that come from. As I said, you open the cabinet and there's 50 flasks, each with these different letters and things on them. But it was the HeLa cells that I've learned how to manipulate these things in a laboratory environment. And that's what eventually allowed me to go on to develop the skill to work with the URA cells that I was working with for the von Hippel-Lindau syndrome. I didn't know what HeLa meant, and for a long time, it doesn't occur to you to ask that kind of thing. You don't, you're just there. It's there. It's like part of the environment in which you find yourself, and it was one of many. It was years later that I learned that HeLa is an acronym for a person. It's a person's name. And I learned that her name was Henrietta Lax. It's kind of funny, I remember learning that, and it almost felt like, if you can imagine this, like maybe you had the experience where you learned that somebody that you didn't know but you had an experience with, maybe a musician that you liked as a teenager, or a movie star that you appreciated as a young person. You learned that person has passed away, and there's this sort of distant sadness that you feel, like there's something lost, but even though you didn't know the person, you still feel that sense of loss. I kind of felt like that, to learn there was this person that I didn't know, but that had passed and had this life experience that now I was somehow still having an experience with some piece of that person. So I guess what I'd say, to move past those early trainings and sort of where I am now as the Dean of Science, Math, and Engineering, I guess what I'd say is one of the things you learn when you become a scientist, it's not apparent during your training, it's not apparent in many ways, it's not apparent to many people, but scientists learn that it's messy and slow. The process of science is messy and slow. And that can be very frustrating because we expect and want science to take us quickly into some better future. Sometimes that happens. Every now and then you get an Einstein or a Newton or somebody like that that advances things in some dramatic way. But most of science isn't like that. Most of science is a collection of small things that accrue over time and in ways that are almost imperceptible. You really don't see the progress until you're at some point in the future and you look back and you say, there really has been progress in our efforts to understand the world, to understand ourselves and the biology, and to use those discoveries in ways that benefit us. So I guess in tribute to Miss Lax, I would just say that she's one of those small events. Her life was one of those small events that came on the earth. She lived her life, and she left something of herself that contributed in some way to a deeper understanding that has benefited all of us. So just looking at the program, Dave, that I really like what you've written here, which is that someone you knew but didn't know you knew. And I guess I would say that even though I never met Miss Lax, I'm very glad that I knew her and that she was able to contribute in ways that have made my life better and all of our lives better. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
You know, that's why we're here today, is to get our hands around what has worked. You know, Henrietta Lax died in 1951, and hers was the most suppressed story in modern medicine. But yet, just like Craig said, all of us have run into her. He ran into her in education, and now look, he's our darling dean of science right here at this school, right? Who would have thought that that story was in him? And you know, today is about the story. Yes, it is. Today is about the story. And for people that have cancer, the story is what matters. Because you don't know when the story is going to end, but you do know what's in the chapters in between. When Henrietta Lax comes along into her life, she lifted me up personally. I didn't know her, and I was laid up in the hospital. And I found out about her when I read about the surgery that they were going to do. So that's a funny story, and we'll talk about that later. Right now, we're going to move along because today we have someone who is going to help us to learn more about storytelling and how it can help us with cancer. You know, reading, writing, arithmetic, they were right about it. It does definitely work. So I'm going to ask Dr. Susan Sample, PhD, from the Huntsman Cancer Institute to come up and bring it. That's the best way to put it. Thank you, Dr. Susan. Let's welcome her.
Thank you, David. Yes. And welcome everybody here, and then those who are watching us as well. So, as David said, I'm the writer in residence at the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and I've been in that position for the first person to hold it probably for about 9 years or so. But I've worked directly with writing in patients since, probably 2002, so it's been a long time, and patients with many kinds of illness besides cancer. I'm also on the faculty at the School of Medicine, and I work with writing and reflective writing and medical humanities with medical students and physicians. So it's an interesting position to be able to share some of the insights. But today I want to talk about my work at Huntsman. And I work under the Wellness and Integrative Health Center, where we focus on care, not cure, care, as you had mentioned earlier. With rapidly increasing advances in biomedicine and technology, many cancers have been transformed into chronic illnesses. Some patients can even be cured, but not all. Yet for all patients at Huntsman, we strive to provide healing so they can find a sense of wellness. And one way to heal is through stories. Becoming seriously ill is a call for stories, says Arthur Frank, a medical sociologist who wrote The Wounded Storyteller. After he was diagnosed and treated for testicular cancer as a young man, he was able to use his training to critically reflect on his experiences and explore how cancer affected not only his body, but his sense of identity. For serious illness transforms us from a person to a patient. As soon as we walk into a clinical exam room, as soon as you walk into the hospital and register there. Our unique quirks and characteristics often fade into the background as our injured, sick bodies take up the foreground, as they should. We want and expect our physicians and our nurses, our therapists and researchers to attend to our ailing body. But what happens to ourselves in the process? Seriously ill people are wounded not just in body, but in voice, says Frank. They need to become storytellers in order to recover the voices that illness and its treatment often take away. Stories have to repair the damage that illness has done to the ill person's sense of where she is in life and where she may be going. Many of you are students here at Salt Lake Community College. You've completed high school or taking classes to prepare you for your future, a job, a home, close relationships with other people, maybe marriage and a family. But who includes cancer in their plans? This is why illness is a call for story, because the present is not what it was supposed to lead up to, says Frank, and the future is scarcely unthinkable. When you receive a cancer diagnosis, time can suddenly stop. All that you've done in the past is erased, and the future becomes that you've carefully planned and envisioned is just this giant blur. Lucille Clifton describes this well. She was an inspiring and beloved Black poet who won numerous awards, including the National Book Award, before she died in age 73 in 2010. She had cancer 3 times, in addition to a kidney transplant and other health problems that she wrote about with honesty, elegance, and humor. So I want to read one of her poems in recognition of Henrietta Lacks, and it's titled Cancer. The first time the dreaded word bangs against your eyes, so you think you must have heard it, but what you know is that the room is twisting crimson on its hinge, and all the other people are dolls watching from their dollhouse chairs. The second time you hear a swoosh, as if your heart has fallen down a well and shivers in the water, trying not to be there. The third time, and you are so tired, and you nod your head and smile and walk away from the angel uniforms and the blood machines, and you enter the nearest movie house, and you stand in the last aisle, staring at the screen with your living eyes. Thank you. Stories help us make sense of the unimaginable. As we write, our thoughts become visible. We can literally see what we're feeling. We become alive not only through our voice and our words that we hear on the page, we become alive through our body, our arms, our hands, as they move across a keyboard. And as our bodies and our minds reconnect through story, we can create a new sense of wholeness, of who we are, our identity, that takes into account our illness. Stories enable us to make meaning of ourselves as we reflect on what we've gone through, and meaning makes healing possible. I've been working this past year with a young woman in her 30s with a rare inherited cancer. She's writing a book for her very young child. Her prognosis is not good, and whether her child will get to know her once they become a teenager, an adult, it's questionable. This patient has endured multiple surgeries and chemotherapies, and they've been very difficult to relive as she's writing. She remembers so many painful details. Yet she keeps telling me how amazed she is, for in the process of telling her story, she's discovering new meaning in her life. She recognizes her suffering. She's not denying it. But as she writes about her experiences, she gains wisdom that transcends her suffering, enables her to reach out to others with love and compassion that I so admire her for. Ken Brewer was Utah's second poet laureate. Halfway through his 5-year term when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. A retired English professor from Utah State University, he altered his life, he said, drafting poems every day. Revision lost its appeal. In the foreword to his book that was published about 6 months after he died, Whale Song, A Poet's Journey into Cancer, he says, I think of this book as my chronicle of living with the certainty of death, but dealing with that in one way, through the writing of poetry. And I'd add here that poetry is a way of telling stories. Sometimes it's just much more compact, too. The poems changed in intensity, quality, and theme as I changed day to day. This is, after all, what might be the greater value of the book to readers. The journey into cancer. Writing began to heal my spirit. He said writing, and he also said the nurturing love of his wife, his family, and his friends. So I want to read to you one of his wonderful poems from this book. It's called The Measure, for Star and Karen. I measure my life in friends, and I am humbled by the numbers, the quality, the style, path, policy, and grace. I measure my life in days with friends right, when we converse as they sit by my bed, read poems, and listen. I measure my life in family who speak through tears, who serve me meals on a wicker tray, who pray and love and float. I measure my life in pine siskins who entertain me in feeders outside my window, and Gus the schnauzer who curls next to me. I measure my life in friends who do not know my sins, who hug my shrunken body, who break open my heart with words. I measure my life in cancer that has taught me how to measure my life. I wish you could have heard Ken reading it, because he, if any of you knew him, he orchestrated as he read, and his arm would go like this. It was really wonderful. And Gus, his schnauzer, the day that Ken died, started howling. And anyway, I could keep going on that. But I want to tell you about another patient I worked with before the pandemic. I met an older man. He was in his late 70s at the infusion center at Huntsman, where he was undergoing chemotherapy for stage 4 colon cancer. The chemo wouldn't cure him. He knew that. He told me that. He said it would just give him more time to be with his family. He'd worked as a tech writer and now was drafting the second of 3 science fiction fantasies. So I would stop by and visit. We would talk about these. He didn't ever really take me up on different prompts or little writing games that I would bring by to help people pass the time when they're having chemo for hours. One day, though, he told me he included a haiku at the beginning of every chapter in his second book, and I said, a haiku. I said, why don't you write a haiku about the infusion center? So he wrote one and started and wrote me several. Several weeks later, he dictated a longer poem that I transcribed, and it was about time. And when I'm working with people in the infusion center, because you don't often feel that good, you're very tired when you're undergoing chemo and radiation. So I say, you get to do the fun part, you just think, and I'll just type it all up. And then I shape it according to their voice, according to what I know about them, what we've been talking about. So I did that with this man, Jay's poem, and I brought it back to him the next time we met. And I showed it to him, and his wife exclaimed, "Oh, Jay, that's good." She was a retired English teacher. And so we met a few more times, and then he had chemo at home. He was off that. So I only saw him a few times. But one day in the hallway outside the wellness center, he stopped me and he held up this paper and he goes, "Look what you've done to me." And it was 2 sides there, and it was 2 pages of a poem that he'd written. He said, "I woke up at 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. Look what you did." And so he joked on that. And he showed me a few more after we'd catch each other once in a while in the hallway. When I'd see him now, he was much thinner. He was always on oxygen. But it was wonderful to see him. And he told me he was putting together a book of poems. So one January, about 3 months later, his wife comes to see me at Huntsman, and she gives me a book of poems. And 76 pages of poems that he had written in the last couple months of his life. He titled the book, "Love Songs to Life." Just a few days before he died, he chose some words for his cover that just gave me pause when I saw them and every time when I see them. So in the back, he had some pictures from a duck pond where he and his wife had moved. And it said, "From a writer and a cancer survivor." Through his writing, Jay found new meaning in his life that enabled him to say he survived cancer. It did not kill him. He found such new meaning in his life once he started writing. I wanted to read a poem here too. The last one. This is by Raymond Carver, and he was a very well-known short story, a master of the short story, who left his mark on the form that some of you may be familiar with him. He died of lung cancer. He was diagnosed when he was age 40. 10 years later, he died. He said that he beat the odds and lived those 10 years, and he wrote about it very towards the end in a poem he called Gravy. No other word will do, for that's what it was, gravy. Gravy, these past 10 years, alive, sober, working, loving, and being loved by a good woman. 11 years ago, he was told he had 6 months to live at the rate he was going, and he was going nowhere but down. And so he changed his ways somehow. He quit drinking, and the rest, after that, it was all gravy. Every minute of it, up to and including when he was told about, some things that would be breaking down and building up inside his head. "Don't weep for me," he told his friends. "I'm a lucky man. I had 10 years longer than I or anyone expected. Pure gravy, and don't forget it." Raymond Carver lived up in Port Townsend area. He grew up in Oregon and had lived in California. He was a Western writer, and he's buried in the West too. And on his gravestone is an inscription I want to share because I think it's one that my patient Jay probably would have put on his too. It says, "Late fragment. And did you get from you what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth." So in closing, I wasn't quite truthful. I have one more short poem that I wanted to offer you some advice because I know that you are focused on storytelling today. And some of you will be recording stories about your experiences, someone you knew who has cancer or had cancer. And Louise Clifton said this, so I will give her the parting words because she was so wonderful. "Why some people be mad at me? They ask me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories, and I keep on remembering mine. So please keep remembering your memories, recording those and sharing those, because I do believe with all my heart that the writing and telling of stories can be healing. Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you. You know how I feel about that. Yeah, come here, give us a hug. Oh, my God. You know, cancer people, we got to hug, right?
That's right.
That's our thing, right? We're always about caring and hugging and loving and, man, just so much. Boy, I would like to listen to her do that all day, but I hope that it got inside somewhere and it feels good. Because the purpose of today is to give you more ways to deal with the cancer experience in your life and to be able to help others to do so. And thank you, Dr. Sample. Thank you so much. Man, I've been waiting years for that. And I'm not going to make you wait anymore so that we can hear some words from our keynote speaker, Dr. Richard Ferguson, University of Utah and Black Physicians of Utah. Dr. Ferguson?
All right, I thank you again for the introduction there. I see more my purpose here as, I don't know if I'm the first or second or third physician to speak today, but I think a physician's perspective on Henrietta Lacks' life, and particularly that of a black physician. So I'll share actually my first experience that I had hearing about Henrietta Lacks' story and her cell line. So, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, honored colleagues, when I was asked to give a speech today as a representative of BPOU, I recalled the first time I heard Henrietta Lacks' story as a young high school student working in the immunogenetics lab at Howard University's med school back in the early 90s. I remember my mentor, Dr. Paulette Harris, pulling me aside and telling me that the cell line that I was working with as part of my gene sequencing project were HeLa cells. She shared with me the story of how the cells were originally taken from a black woman in the Baltimore area that died of cervical cancer. It didn't have a lot of significance to me at that time. I was 16, 17 years old. She then shared more about how most of Lacks' family didn't know of her cell's contribution to science and medicine until long after her death. That was over 30 years ago. And what is kind of disheartening is that her history and legacy was not discussed at any point, and I emphasize at any point, during my medical education from Michigan State, where I went to med school, to my time in the Army as a battalion and brigade surgeon, or even during my residency at University of Utah. I hope this has changed by now. I did not learn more about her legacy and impact on medicine until formally speaking with my prior mentor in high school, until I crossed by a book when I was studying at the Barnes & Nobles in Sugar House. And that was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Ever since that time, I've shared her story again and again, as Dr. Paulette Harris did for me many years ago. I share it with my mentees, loved ones, and colleagues when discussing the contributions that African Americans have contributed to modern medicine. Although what I will share will be reminiscent of the film shown earlier today. Did people see the film? Was part of it shown? Yeah. Okay, all right. I was trying to time for that. But I'm hopeful that a black physician perspective, once again, will be beneficial. So today I want to explore the profound bioethical importance and the indelible impact of Henrietta Lacks' HeLa cells and modern medical advancements. But first, let's understand a bit more about the woman behind the life-changing HeLa cell line. Mind you, some of this may be a little bit repetitive, but I found it sets the tone of her achievements. So Henrietta, from Clover, Virginia, to Turner Station, Maryland, when her husband, Day Lacks, took a job at Bethlehem Steel Sparrow's Point Mill plant. Henrietta had 4 children at that time and was pregnant with a 5th child, Joe, I believe, when she began to show signs and symptoms of cervical cancer. These signs and symptoms, primarily worrisome of bleeding and a lump on her cervix, Her tumor was seen before the birth of her youngest child, Joe, and on her follow-up exam 6 weeks later, but was missed or dismissed on examination. And actually, to give a little bit more context, it was misdiagnosed at that time. This often isn't a part of her story that's often told. It was actually diagnosed as being a epidermoid carcinoma of her cervix for the docs and providers in the audience, when it was actually metastatic adenocarcinoma of her cervix. And that actually didn't come out until around 1970. Mind you, she passed in 1951. She experienced a delay of care, which many African Americans to this day, due to institutional systemic racism, still experience delays in care. The delay of care she received in the care of renowned gynecologists, Dr. Howard Jones, led her to going several months before officially being diagnosed with cervical cancer. Well, shortly after her diagnosis, Henrietta had no idea how she would go from an ordinary woman from Virginia to unknowingly contributing to one of the most significant chapters in medical science. As seen and stated earlier this afternoon, during her battle with cervical cancer, a small biopsy was taken from Henrietta without her consent or knowledge. Little did she or her family know that these cells will become an immortal cell line. Now, the bioethical dimensions of Henrietta Lacks' story should prompt us to reflect on issues of consent, autonomy, and the responsible use of human tissues. Her story raises questions about the ethical considerations surrounding medical research and the rights of individuals whose biological materials become instrumental in scientific breakthroughs. Unfortunately, I see many parallels in Mrs. Lacks' story, highlighting a dark facet of America's medical and scientific progress, fueled by racist, unethical practices in the past and present that have taken so much from black people and given very little in return. What if I told you that although Lacks' family may have received monetary restitution from Thermo Fisher this year for what happened over 70 years ago, there are other black Virginians and Americans like Lacks' whose bodies and tissues have also contributed to medical and scientific progress. So where is their reward? Where is their atonement? The sepia-skinned victims of Richmond grave robbers, the unidentified black people whose bodies were stolen and dissected so that physicians at Virginia medical schools could better study anatomy. What payment did they or their relatives get for giving their bodies into the hands of white medical professionals? None. What about the thousands of African Americans who were forcibly sterilized, sometimes without their knowledge, under Virginia's 1924 Eugenical Sterilization Act, legislation that wasn't outlawed until 1979? What do they get? Nothing. And lastly, a story we are all very familiar with. What about the 600 black men infected with syphilis as administrators of the Tuskegee experiment watched the disease ravage them, never offering penicillin to treat the condition? What benefit did they reap? Many of these men had died by the time a class action lawsuit awarded a piddly $10 million to survivors and their descendants in 1974. The disrespect of black bodies has been a long part of our American medical history. We right now have measures of consent ingrained into our medical training and biomedical research. I pray history does not repeat itself. Henrietta Lacks, a woman whose life was marked by adversity, leaves us with a legacy that compels us to revisit and reevaluate the ethical foundations of medical research. Now, let's take a minute to focus on the groundbreaking, life-saving, and life-creating achievements that are a direct result of the HeLa cell line. First, HeLa cells played a crucial role in the development of the polio vaccine. Dr. Jonas Salk used HeLa cells to test the vaccine's effectiveness before he had his significant trial where it was used in U.S. children, Canadian children, Finland children, and actually slightly before that. So remember, her cells were harvested without consent in 1951. And then in 1953, he he took the inactivated polio virus at that time, tested it on himself and his family. So there's some ethical concerns there as well. But we're not going to talk about Jonas Salk too much today. But the thing is, the impact is after he then tested the cells before the massive trial that was not only in the US, Canada, and Finland, in HeLa cells, before officially the vaccine getting approved in 1955 and being released worldwide. Second, HeLa cells have been extensively used in cancer research, particularly, and this is what many people do not know from her story, particularly in the prevention of the very cancer that took the life of Henrietta, cervical cancer. The HeLa cell line contributed to the discovery of the human papillomavirus, which causes cervical cancer and ultimately the creation of the now HPV vaccine. Cervical cancer rates have dropped dramatically worldwide, particularly quite a bit in the US. We still got a lot of work to do here in Utah, so talk to your junior high folks and your high schoolers. But that is such a dramatic impact, tested and developed from experimentation with the HeLa cell line. Third, not only did the HeLa cells lay the groundwork for HPV vaccine development, but were also pivotal in what we know today as genome mapping, some of which I was involved in during my time as a young high school student at Howard. This fascinating development occurred in the mid-1960s when HeLa cells were fused with mouse cells, creating the first documented human-animal hybrid cells. Those cells, in turn, became important in the early days of gene mapping. I won't go into too much details, but it's pretty unique on how a protein was produced out of these hybrid cells that led to a lot of the foundations for gene mapping. And lastly, the use of HeLa cells led to the development of life, in vitro fertilization, by the very same doctor that diagnosed and partially misdiagnosed Henrietta with cervical cancer. Dr. Howard Jones of Johns Hopkins, particularly, in 1951, was a provider that diagnosed her with cervical cancer. He used her cells to test the effects of different environments on fertilized eggs to perfect the first in vitro egg fertilization in 1981. So I would just like everyone to know, yet as we marvel at the scientific advancements facilitated by HeLa cells, we must also acknowledge the ethical complexities that accompany such progress. Excuse me. The story of Henrietta Lacks challenges us to confront ethical lapses of the past, inspiring our commitment to a more just and transparent future in medical research. In recent years, there have been significant strides in recognizing the rights of individuals in the context of medical research. The story of Henrietta Lacks serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of informed consent, privacy, and the equitable distribution of the benefits of scientific progress. It calls on us to build an ethical framework that honor the contributions of individuals like Henrietta, her family, and to ensure that the benefits of medical advancements are shared equitably across society. So in conclusion, Henrietta Lacks' HeLa cells have left an indelible mark on modern medical science, both in terms of groundbreaking discoveries and the ethical questions they raise. Let us honor her memory by fostering a culture of respect, transparency, and justice in medical research, a culture that ensures the benefits of scientific progress are shared by all. Thank you.
I feel so much smarter after he talks. Now give me about an hour and it's gone. But right now my cup overflowed. Thank you, Dr. Ferguson. And really, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this event today. Most folks don't know really the fundamental changes in our society that came about because of the phenomenon of Henrietta Lacks. And it's high time that we looked at these things. Because if we look at them together, I can tell you in my cancer experience, I'm happy to be here. But it started when I learned about her in the hospital. And I ran around the hospital saying, you know Henrietta Lacks? Do you know Henrietta Lacks? I know Henrietta Lacks. I'm telling you, I know where she lived, everything, and I didn't stop until my surgery. And she said, the doctor came and said, he'll be all right. He'll be all right. And so everything that has happened up till now in my life from my time of cancer, I always in my mind go back to, I didn't know what HeLa cell meant. I had no idea. And here I was suffering from cancer. And nobody knew. Nobody told me. So I got happy from it because she's from my home. But what really got me happy was the prospect that a normal person can make such a tremendous difference. There are greater miracles to be discovered from any and each of us. Our lives have meaning and substance. Henrietta Lacks came from a very impoverished community. I know. My brother and I came from there. Many of you saw my mother, who was here back in March. She raised us there. The wonderful thing is that let your story be told. You may not have known that you know her, but now you know that you knew her before you knew her. Y'all want me to say that 3 times fast? No. So we're going to take a break because we want to get some photos in and some interviews. And then we're going to come back on the other side, and we're going to have some more speeches, and we're going to have some more tributes. And we'll, you know, if there's any food left, you need to go back and get some. Go ahead, get some food, and refresh yourself, and then we'll be back in about 5 minutes. So thank everybody for coming, and stick around, and let's keep it going. Oh, this is just great, really. You know, when you have cancer, the one thing that happens is that isolation happens. Because to survive, you have to go into this medical space. And the medical space is lonely. It's not your family space. In fact, it's no space that you've ever been in. But at the end of the day, I always now think about, what did Henrietta Lacks suffer? And she died in that lonely space with one wish on her mind, that her cells could help somebody. So we're going to continue to honor her, and later on from 4 to 6, there's going to be a music social. And we're going to play the music from that era and just enjoy ourselves at the end of this very lovely day of storytelling about cancer. But right now, the Huntsman has been so kind to me to allow Miss Gabby to, look at this smile, to allow her to come here and to give us some information that will definitely help us. Because I'm looking at what she got up here, and man, this is just the beginning of a beautiful day. So, Gabby?
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Thank you so much for having us here today. We're very honored to be here to talk about cancer prevention and cancer screenings, and hopefully give you a little bit more information about what that looks like. And just answer some questions. We also have some educational materials here that you're able to take home at the end. So I'll make sure to leave those out on a table so you can take those. Yes. Awesome, thank you. So as I mentioned, my name is Gabby. I'm a community health educator at Huntsman Cancer Institute in the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement. Part of my job is to be out in the community talking to people about cancer screenings, cancer prevention, so that's kind of what we'll do today. And can I have the next slide, please?
Oh, I got to be that kind of clicker.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Thank you. So just a little bit of background. Our mission at Huntsman Cancer Institute is to understand cancer from its beginnings, to use that knowledge in the creation and improvement of cancer treatments, to relieve the suffering of cancer patients, and to provide education about cancer risk, prevention, and care. So we like to start every presentation with just a basic understanding of what cancer is. So if we want to go ahead and click the next one. So this is how we define it at Huntsman Cancer Institute. We say that cancer is a disease in which normal cells start behaving badly. So things that cancer cells do is they multiply uncontrollably, they ignore signals to stop, they can form a tumor or a mass, and they can spread through the blood and lymphatic system. And when it comes to cancer, there are certain things that can increase the risk that you will get cancer. This is what we call risk factors. The first one being age. So the older that you get, the more likely you are to get cancer, especially after age 50. Family history. So if anybody in your family has had cancer, especially if it's a parent or a child. Environmental pollutants like air pollution, occupational exposures, chronic inflammation, alcohol use, tobacco use, infectious agents like viruses, physical inactivity, and your diet. Obesity or being overweight, and how much you're exposed to the sun. And unfortunately, cancer is very common. We expect that 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women will develop cancer in their lifetime. However, the good news is that there are 5 things that you can do to prevent cancer. The first one is avoiding tobacco and testing for radon. The second one is being physically active. The third one is eating healthy. The fourth one is getting screened and vaccinated, and the fifth one is practicing sun safety, and we'll talk about each one of those. So the first one, avoiding tobacco and testing for radon. With tobacco, I'm sure it's not news that tobacco can lead to lung cancer. However, it can increase your chances of getting other types of cancer as well, so we just recommend avoiding it altogether. And if you do currently smoke, we recommend looking into programs for quitting. And with radon, in case you haven't heard of radon, radon is a radioactive gas that breaks down when uranium in the soil breaks down, and it can enter homes. You can't smell it, taste it, or see it, which makes it really tricky. So the only way to know if your home has radon is by testing it. And it's expected that 1 in 3 homes in Utah have radon, so it's really important to test your home every 2 to 5 years. These tests are usually like $10 to $15, and you can find them at home improvement stores, or you can also find them at your local health department. January is actually Radon Awareness Month, so typically they will do campaigns to give out tests for free, so just keep an eye out for that. The second thing is to be physically active. It's recommended that all adults get at least 150 minutes of exercise every week. That's about like 20 to 30 minutes every day. I know that sometimes can be a little bit hard, so we recommend just doing things throughout the day to be more active, like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, parking a little bit further away, just finding ways throughout the day to have more movement. And the third one is to eat healthy. So you want to make sure you're eating a diet full of fruits and vegetables, lean meats, just making sure that you're eating the rainbow, as people say. You want to make sure you're getting colorful vegetables and fruits, and just plant-based items tend to be a little bit more healthier for you. The fourth one is to get screened and vaccinated. And can we actually do the next slide for this one? So we'll go into a little bit more detail. So with cancer screenings, these depend on your age, your family history, and any personal history. So most screenings start at age 18, and then, with skin cancer, head and neck screenings, those typically start at age 18, and then it kind of goes up to age 40. Again, these depend on your age, your family history, your personal history. So what we recommend is to have a good relationship with your doctor and seeing them every year, because they're the ones that can keep you on track and make sure that you're receiving the screenings that you need. And then the second one is getting vaccinated. So there are 2 vaccines that can help prevent cancer. The first one is the HPV vaccine, which can help prevent cervical cancer. This is a vaccine that people can receive starting age 9. So if you're not sure if you've received it, we recommend talking to your doctor about that. And then there's the hepatitis B vaccine, which can help prevent liver cancer. So another one that if you're not sure if you've received it, we recommend talking to your doctor. If you have any questions about if it's right for you or not, highly recommend reaching out to your doctor. And then the 5th one is practicing sun safety. So doing things like wearing sunscreen every day, you want to make sure it's at least SPF 30, and it's broad spectrum. This means it covers all UV light, making sure that you are wearing a hat when you can and staying in the shade as much as you can. Try to avoid tanning and being out in the sun on purpose. And usually the strongest sun rays happen between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. So if you're able to avoid that time out in the sun, that would be ideal. I know it can be a little bit hard. But even in the winter right now, we typically don't think about the sun because it's very cold. However, even when it snows, the snow can sometimes act like a mirror and reflect that sunlight up to your face. So you can get, you can burn or tan even in the winter. So really important to wear sunscreen all year round. And then remember, there are 5 things that we can do to prevent cancer. The first one is avoiding tobacco and testing for radon. The second one is being physically active. The third one is eating healthy. The fourth one is getting screened and vaccinated. And the 5th one is practicing sun safety. And I actually do have this graphic here that you can take home. So I'll put it out in one of the tables so you can take it home and review. We also have this little pamphlet with different screening guidelines and all the different types of cancer that you can get screened for and what age you should start. So I'm going to leave that out on the table as well. And I just have one more slide. So if you have any questions, I'll be hanging out here until 3 p.m. So please feel free to come up to me. We'll chat for a little bit. But if you have any questions after today, we have this really cool resource at Huntsman Cancer Institute called the Cancer Learning Center. Think of it as like a library. We have books, CDs, DVDs, different educational materials related to cancer, whether it's cancer prevention, cancer treatments, anything like that. So if you have more questions, you are welcome to stop by the library. You can call, you can text, you can send them an email. And we also have cancer specialists there that can answer your questions, if you have any specific questions. But that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you.
Look at this. The Huntsman is like, it's the safe haven for cancer folks, right? Because if you don't know any place else to go when you get cancer, go to the Huntsman. You will be happy, trust me. You'll walk in the door and it's so beautiful, you'll forget your problems, if only for a second. And you'll just look and say, oh my goodness, how? And we want you to enjoy that, and that's part of the purpose of today. And it should be mentioned that the cells of Henrietta Lacks are currently being used up there at the research center up at the Huntsman. And that's one of the reasons for having this event today. You can say her things are everywhere. Like we would normally say, she all over the place. And that's a really good thing. So, let's have our next speaker, Ms. Gloria, if you wouldn't mind coming up and sharing some words with us. This is Ms. Gloria Mensah from GK Folks Foundation. And the reason I invited her up here today is because her wonderful group exemplifies what is a main theme of today. People need help to get through difficult situations of bias. And Henrietta Lacks died with bias against her in the basement, the segregated ward of Johns Hopkins. And we're all lucky for that. But that doesn't mean that we should repeat it and that we should do better. That's what we should be doing. And if nothing else, 50 million tons of Henrietta Lacks cells means that there's something in it for all of us. And let's leverage on that and build a better world. Ms. Gloria?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Gloria Mensah, originally from Nigeria in West Africa. I've been in the U.S. almost 15 years. My mom is a cancer survivor, so it's dear to my heart. I remember back in 2010 when we had to go all the way to India from Nigeria to help her have treatment because the treatment in Nigeria wasn't effective for her. And I saw what she went through, chemo and everything, and I'm happy she's alive today, receiving better treatment in the U.S. She didn't have the opportunity to go to Huntsman, but I'm happy she's not going to Huntsman because she's well and okay. But when I came here as an international student, I started a nonprofit organization called GK Folks Foundation. And we are a nonprofit that helps promote Afro culture in the U.S. and also address things that affects the Afro nations in Utah, specifically mental health. We do have a mental health program that kinds of address different aspects of mental health that people of color faces, from anxiety, depression, and just any health-related issues. So we do have various workshops to address all those. We also partnered with the Black Physicians of Utah to provide trusted sources for us. Like when the pandemic hit, there was so many backlash and so many things that people had to face, saying that, quote unquote, Black people are being tested, and that's why the vaccine is being encouraged. There were so many myths and so many false news that was going around the Black community. So we had to help educate people about the importance of vaccination, and we covered different topics, including cancer. So our nonprofit definitely helps the Black community in Utah to be educated, enlightened, and take care of their health with our mental health program. We also have entrepreneurship programs where we partner with SBA and International Rescue Committee to provide business resources to small Black-owned businesses in the community. So if you're looking for loans, grants, or bookkeeping, or literally anything to make your business be successful, we do have partners in the community who we can link you up with to make your business successful. We also organize cultural events. The Afro-Utah Festival, we organize that every year to promote Black-owned businesses. We had over 60 Black-owned businesses featured during the festival, patronized, and also recognized for their contribution to the community. So we do that every year, and we would just love to extend an invitation to everyone. Save the date, September 21st, 2024. Come have fun and just enjoy Afro culture. I came across David during our Afro-Utah Festival. He covered the event for us, and he did a great job just helping us understand what he does at school here and how SLCC has been, or SLCC is a good resource for us to partner with. So I am here to officially thank David for donating his time to help our nonprofit organization during the festival and giving us the opportunity to be here, talk about what we do. I do have a check to show our appreciation for David. And if you don't mind, David, I would love to donate this to you and the great work that you do.
Wow! Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Man, I want to do it next year, too. Y'all want to see something here in a minute. I'm going to show y'all that in a few minutes. Are you done?
Well,
No, she ain't done. She ain't done. Go ahead, Lord.
okay, I just want to say thank you, and yes, I am done.
Okay, now you're done, but look, don't move. I want to show you something. No, you want to sit down. I want to show you something. I want to forget. See? Here is some of their excellent. It was really a pleasure to work with all of you. Really a pleasure. And if you didn't come, you missed something. So here we go. This is just one of the red carpet interviews. If you know this person. Oh, there it is, okay. This is just one of the red carpet interviews from the Afro-Utah Awards dinner.
Hello, Eddie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you tonight?
Blessed.
I understand you're receiving an award tonight.
Yes, Community Advocate Award. Really excited. We've been partnering with AfroFest for 3 years now.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. And great job on your contributions in the community. We do really appreciate that. So what does this award mean for you?
It means so much. We came, my partner, Dr. Thomas Apia and I have been working together on this specific event for the last 3 years with our company, L3 Harris Technologies. And every year it just steps up. Every year it's another level. This year they added a fashion show. I'm really excited about that. The festival's incredible.
That's amazing. So what's on the horizon for you as well?
Ooh, on the horizon we have our Black History program coming up next year, next February. Really excited about that. We have a young men's mentorship group that we're putting together. A lot of community initiatives with Rise Virtual Academy and different groups. So always looking to partner and help our youth.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your contributions in the community. And thank you for gracing me with your presence on the red carpet. I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. And thank you. Congratulations once again.
Now, having had a taste, don't you just wish that you was at that festival? I could show you more, but you would probably not be able to restrain yourself today. And I do go a little bit over the top, but that's what this is all about. So we're going to move forward, and we're going to have our medical experience keynote speaker. And this is the first person here at Salt Lake Community College whom I found out has a cancer experience that I'm astounded by. You know, cancer people love cancer people. We do. You go through the world and then somebody says, oh, I got cancer. You say, I got cancer. Oh, God, this is wonderful. And then you become all close. And that's how it's supposed to be. Instant bonds, family. But then you ask yourself, dang, why wasn't I like this before without cancer? What was that all about? So we're here to tell that story. And our next speaker is Professor Jen Clank from Salt Lake Community College. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, David. Always one of my favorite students. And now I can say colleague and friend, so I really appreciate that. I'm honored to be here. Henrietta Lacks saved my life in so many ways. She saved many people's lives. In fact, it is estimated that she saved almost 10 million lives through the research that has been done through the use of her cells. Her cells were the first human living cells that we were able to do research on. They were the first cells to be cloned. They helped find the cure for polio. They helped advance research on salmonella. And they helped nanotechnology in the study of cancer, which I have a friend that just went through. He just did 36 rounds in India with nanotechnology and reported that he had none of the side effects that radiation would have. He's at stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and he is surviving the fight, which is huge. So his name's Anoop Nair. I'll give Anoop a huge hand. He helps us with our India study abroad. And I've been on this journey with him this past year, and it's amazing that Henrietta Lacks, in a way, also contributed to his cancer story and his cancer journey on the other side of the world. That's phenomenal to me. The courage of Henrietta Lacks had to be so huge because it was at a time where there was mistrust with the Black community and the medical community. It was at a time where they were not treated equally. She was not even buried in a marked grave, which I understand has now been corrected. And it was at a time where she didn't necessarily give her permission, but I know that I am sure she would be very pleased with the progress that has been done with the contribution that she did make to the medical world, because that contribution was huge. The first human cells that we could ever do research on. That is a phenomenal contribution. And that research continues to carry over and carry over, and more lives are saved every year because of this contribution. So I am so honored and happy to be a part of this celebration because it really means a lot to me to celebrate somebody that needs to be celebrated, a name that needs to be out there. She's considered the mother of medicine. And when we think about medicine, this is somebody that should be at the forefront of our minds. And her work, the work that's been done from her contributions are going to impact each and every one of your lives in some way at some point in time. Where 1 out of 3 people have a chance of getting cancer, that means you have a huge chance of getting cancer. That means somebody you know, somebody in your family has a huge chance of getting cancer. So I was asked to share my story. My story is a little different because I was born with cancer. I was born with cancer of the nerve endings, and it wasn't discovered until I was 5 years old. I had strep throat, I had a swelling, and one side of my neck went down and the other side didn't. And it was almost dismissed. The doctors thought, well, it must be a pus pocket. Let's go in and look at the pus pocket. So they took me in for an operation, and that's when they discovered that there was a cancerous tumor in my neck. And it was actually such a shock to them, and this was in 1980, and I don't know if they had the right tools or what, but my surgeon who saved my life used his fingernail to scrape out the tumor, which gave me a staph infection, but I would rather have a staph infection than cancer, so I'm grateful to him for saving my life. I did have to go back in for more surgery, and I did spend a lot of time at Primary Children's Hospital, which I'm very grateful for because they saved me my whole childhood. Up to the age of 5, my first childhood memories are at Primary Children's Hospital. And I was there close to my birthday. I was 4 when I went in, I was 5 when I came out. And I love people, so it was not a bad experience for me. A lot of people everybody has a different cancer story. Mine's different because it was the only life I knew. I didn't come out knowing any other life. So going to the doctor was no big deal because I just thought that's what everybody did. Going to a cancer ward and seeing kids without hair, I thought that was just life. They were just people that were like me, but just looked a little differently in some way. And you don't really realize the impact that it has on you until you go through that experience and reflect on it. And I haven't really had to reflect on it until I had to do the speech. So this has been a journey for me to get to the point to be able to do this speech and share my story, because for me, I was just living life. And I think in some ways, the people that have cancer, yeah, they go through hard things, but it's actually harder on the people that are surrounding them. The feeling of helplessness. The feeling of hopelessness. Some people have hope all the way to the end, and some people, they lose that hope halfway through the battle. And watching somebody that you love and care about with all your heart go through something really hard and knowing there's nothing you can do to really help their journey. I think it's harder for the people that surround the people that are doing this battle sometimes than the people that are fighting for their life, because we're just living life. We're just trying to get through each day the best that we possibly can. But we don't realize the impact that that has on the people around us. So I'm grateful for my mom, because my mom made it a positive experience. When we were in there, everything was a game. We would have a game of how long we would have to count whenever they gave us a shot. We would have a game of how many people came in and out of the room. Everything was a fun game, and I got presents. Like, I thought it was Christmas every day. I thought it was so cool. My mom was a school teacher, and her entire class wrote me cards. So I had all these cards to read while I was in the hospital, and I was so grateful that I had all these people pouring out love. I got a drum, which I drum now. Nobody likes to listen to me drum, but I love it. So it definitely set me on a path to being a musician. I got a record player, and I got to play records while I was in there. And so every day was a unique adventure and a unique experience. And that's a lot different from somebody that knows a healthy life and then suddenly goes from a healthy life to a not healthy life. This is the only life I knew. So when I was rid of cancer, by the time I was 6, I still had to go to Primary Children's and check in every year. That was the first time I knew a healthy life. And then when I was 12, I got cancer again. And this time it was cancer of the thyroid. And I had cancer of the thyroid until I was 19, and I was a college student here at Salt Lake Community College when I had the surgery to remove my thyroid cancer. So for me, cancer looked like my entire teenage years. And the second time I had cancer, it was really hard on my mom, because the first time almost killed her. The second time, she didn't even want to deal with it. So we pretended it didn't exist. That's how we dealt with it. I found out from my soccer coach I had cancer. My soccer coach was a nurse, and my mom told her I could only have so much playing time. I played varsity soccer. And apparently I was radioactive, and so I couldn't be in the sun for very long. So my mom arranged with my coaches an amount of time that was appropriate for me to play without injuring my body. I had no idea this was going on. But my soccer coach looked at my medicine and looked at it, and she said, "This is for cancer." And that's the first time I was aware as a teenager that I had cancer. And I'm kind of grateful for that, because I just lived life. I was just extremely tired. And nobody else knew, nobody gave me pity, nobody gave me sympathy. I was not defined by cancer, and that is one of the things that happens to a lot of people that go through cancer. A lot of people distance themselves from it when they find out, because they don't want to care for someone that they know they might lose. That's a really hard thing to go through. And a lot of people will just give you pity or sympathy and define you by that. But we're not defined by that. We're defined by the things that we do with the time that we have in this life. We're defined by how we interact with other people. We're defined by caring for others, the kindness that we give others, the compassion that we give others. So the gifts that I got from cancer, I am so grateful for. Because the gifts that I got from cancer, I am grateful for every single day that I live and breathe. And I want to make the most of that time. It is not important to me to have a ton of money. I wish that were my goal, because that would really save a lot of stress and a lot of things. But that's not my goal. My goal is to make the most of my time here with the people that I get to interact with. And that's why I teach. I teach because I love it. I teach because I was a student here, and Salt Lake Community College was kind to me when I was a cancer patient and when I was a student here. And they had the most resources set up to the success of the student than any other college or university that I've been interfaced with. And I've interfaced with 8,000 through other jobs. And this had the most set up for the student's success. So when I thought about what I wanted to do with my life, I did everything I wanted to do in life before I was 30. And then I hit 30 and went, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Because I've already accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. I lived every day like I might not have tomorrow. That was what cancer gave me. And then I had to decide a new path. How am I going to change my life and do something with my life? So I have a few things that I've put together to help people not only cope with cancer, but help people get through life. And in marketing, we have the 4 Ps of marketing. But for my personal journey, I have 3 Ps, just 3 things to remember. The first is people. The people that surround you are important. And the people that celebrate who you are as a human are your most important people. And I would not have survived this cancer journey without the people in my life, without my grandmother saying, you got to go back to that doctor, or you got to get that checked, even though the doctors were so submissive, without my mom making a game of everything. I didn't suffer as a cancer patient when I was young because of my mom, because everything was fun, except for the spinal tap, not fun. But everything else was pretty fun. I got to see people all the time. I just had a great childhood experience. And my doctor would tell you that he enjoyed it when I came in because I was so happy to be there because of my mom. And because I was happy, the other people around me, the other children around me were happy. And I was so excited. I had new friends every single day, and they had Pac-Man and Donkey Kons. So I'm grateful for Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. The second P is purpose. You have to have a purpose for getting out of bed every single day. And it doesn't matter if you have cancer or not. I think this is good advice for anybody going through something hard. Find something to have purpose for that day. Do something that day. Doesn't matter what it is. Just find one thing to get done every single day. I have helped a lot of people through their cancer journey, not by doing anything big, but just helping them find a purpose. I had a guitar teacher that had bone cancer. I didn't know anybody that could survive that. And I made her teach me lessons every single week. Even if I showed up and she was not physically able to teach, I still showed up every single week because she needed that. She needed that purpose. She needed something that she was responsible for, that she had to get out of bed for, so that she didn't give in to the cancer. And she survived. She's the first person I've ever met with bone marrow cancer that survived. The third is persistence. I would not be here if it were not the persistence of my grandmother, the persistence of my grandmother nagging my mom incessantly to get that lump checked out, my mom nagging the doctors incessantly to continue with research and diagnosis. And I would not be here without the persistence of continuing going to the doctor, continuing seeking medical help, and looking for the pre-signs of cancer. So this ties into Henrietta Lacks because just this semester, I found out I have pre-cancer in the cervical and ovarian area, which Henrietta Lacks had cancer, cervical cancer. So because of that research, we're able to detect it early. I'm able to get rid of it before it even starts. And I'm able to have a happy and healthy life because of it. So I'm so grateful because she is still continuing to save my life to this day. I'm also grateful for the Henrietta Lacks family because they're holding the medical field accountable for where the money goes and what the research, who gets to use the cells for research. They did not find out till the 1970s that Henrietta Lacks' cells were being utilized for research, for medical research. They had no idea. And from finding out for that, they were able to find out the journey of the cells. I'm actually kind of envious of that because my tumor from when I was born is in a lab in DC, and I can only hope that it's helped somebody in some way, and it's not just sitting there. So the fact that they're holding people accountable, they're able to track that, and just this last year, they've been in a political negotiation over a pharmaceutical company that was profiting off of the use and not sharing those profits in appropriate ways, and they're holding them accountable for that. So they're changing the conversation on medical ethics. They're changing the conversation on who can profit from your body and your cells, and they're creating a better future for us on all fronts. And some people may not even be aware, but Henrietta Lacks' cells went into space, and we were able to study how space affects humans and how space affects our cells. So the gift keeps on giving over and over and over. She is one of the most beneficial, important humans in medicine and society. And her name needs to be out there. In closing, there are a few people that I would like to honor because I have a podium and because some people can watch this. And the people that I would like to honor are friends and family who fought this battle. And I apologize if I get a little emotional because some of those people did not make it to the other side of this battle. So to honor the people that I know that have fought this battle, I'd like to start with my cousins, who at the age of 5 also fought a battle with cancer. My cousin Jake Price, he did not win his battle. He passed at 5. My cousin Claire, she won her battle, and she's still alive, she's still kicking, she's still screaming, she's still going. My piano teacher, Donna Bates, I lost her at the age of 15. My dance teacher, I also lost her at the age of 15, Miss Renee, both to cancer. My Uncle Billy, lung cancer, lost the battle, but he was happy when he went. My Uncle Buddy, just through the pandemic, lost him to melanoma. My cousin Dave Cordell, I just lost him this last year. Chris Jones, extended family, survived leukemia. My friend Jennifer Madrian survived breast cancer within the last couple of years. My colleagues, Dave Sanders, my colleague Mark Hansen, who also teaches here, just survived leukemia just this last year. And sisters that I grew up with, Amanda Bowen survived. Her sister Chrissy passed away last year. And also, I wanted to give a shout out to Clint Martin, who is still fighting his battle with cancer as a young person in his 20s, and Anoop Nair, who just was the gentleman I mentioned that was fighting with nanotechnology, and it's going very well with his stage 4 cancer. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to teach at Salt Lake Community College. This has been a full circle journey for me. I so much appreciate the opportunity to speak and share my journey. Thank you.
And I would be remiss if I did not give you an opportunity to hear a few words from Allison Mower of the Marriott Library. And she's going to tell us something that I know pretty much hardly anybody's heard. So, Allison.
Thanks, David. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. That was such a powerful story, Jen. And Richard, your keynote was wonderful. This is a really great event. And thank you to David for organizing this. I'm kind of an outlier, I guess. I'm a librarian. I work at the University of Utah at Marriott Library. And I partnered recently with Reverend France Davis to create what's now called the France Davis Utah Black Archive. I was the convener that kind of brought the group together. It was Reverend Davis's idea to establish the archive. It's housed at the University of Utah. It's only a few months old. I think we're just coming up on a year old. So we have a few items in there, really special items. We have some oral histories, 9 oral histories. We did a launch event about this time last year and partnered with a nonprofit foundation called Sema Hadithi. They focus on African American culture and heritage. They're based in West Valley City, but do work throughout Utah. They conducted the oral histories and asked questions about what it's like to live in Utah and experiences in Utah, how people came here, if people were born here, you know, just kind of some brief life stories. And just hearing Jen's story just now, I think, and I know we all know this, like that incredible power that stories have. And I think that was the idea behind Reverend Davis's thinking around establishing this archive. So I've spent the last year really trying to encourage people to contribute to the archive. Its mission is to really tell the story of the Utah Black community and to give a space for Utah Black people in Utah, African Americans in Utah, recent immigrants in Utah, the work that, you know, the Afro Utah Festival does. That whole rich experience, I think his whole mission was to bring that all together into one site. So it's open, basically, is like the message that I'm here to give you, and it's open for people to contribute, and hopefully it's easy. I mean, we try to make it as easy as possible. So if you just happen to have your phone with you, or maybe a little bit later, if you Google France Davis Utah Black Archive, you will see it. It's one of the first hits, and you'll see the wonderful photographs we've got in there so far, and then those 9 oral histories. And then later in the links, kind of down on the page on the links, is how you submit to the archive. So it's accepting submissions, and it's born digital. So like the wonderful video that David showed from the Afro Utah Festival, it's content like that. You know, it's like these really important happenings, especially even like today's happening. I know David has done other events on the history of Henrietta Lacks, and we want to archive those events too. So I'm just here to let you know about the existence of the archive, and if you have questions about how it works, I am available. Like Gabby was saying too, she's here around till 3. I'm here till about 4:30. So if you're wondering how to contribute, how to submit, how it works, that's what I am here to help with. My basic day job is copyright. I know, another outlier. It's like not related to almost any of this, but I kind of help basically with the terms of how it works when people submit content that they own and that they create. It's really a way to encourage authorship and to encourage copyright ownership and to really, I don't know, just give that power that comes with storytelling and letting other people hear and know your story is really important to me as a librarian and to libraries in general. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, David, for the invite.
Thank you. And I think this is a fitting way to bring this portion of our tribute to Henrietta Lacks to a close for our live stream performance. And I want to thank everybody who participated, starting from Gina all the way down to Allison and everyone in between. Thank you, Dr. Ferguson. Thank you, Professor Klink. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you, Teresa, for being on the camera. Thank you, Silas, for bringing in the live stream. It's been going out on YouTube. But the one thing about today that we want everyone to take away from this room, your story is your journey. It's as real as you are and as beneficial as it can be to be shared, no matter what it is. And in sharing, just imagine what would have happened if we could have heard the story of Henrietta Lacks in 1952. In 1964, I went to school at Fleming Elementary, 1 block away from the home of Henrietta Lacks. I got my polio shot at Fleming Elementary. Had no idea that the woman who was responsible for the testing that brought that vaccine into safe usage just lived right down the street. I'm fortunate. I learned who she was in my cancer experience. But I can tell you up to then I had no hope. And from everything I've heard today, there's so much more hope than we can imagine. And all that we have to do is share it with each other. So thank everybody. This concludes our live stream. And I want everybody on the count of 3 to say, thank you, Henrietta. 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Henrietta. We're out.